Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time to remember this crap about the Washington, don't call us the Redskins or the football team. We are the Commodores? The Commodes? No, the Commanders. I'm just going to call them the Commodes because it's more fun. So with me as always to talk about crap and why you can't talk about crap without a commode is Mike Donahue. Mike?
True that. Good, Andy. I think, oddly enough, I don't think it's problematic to actually remember this crap about the Washington Redskins, but
no, we're remembering what they were. We have to. It would be we'd be ignoring their proud history of racism.
Really, from Jump Street too, as we'll get into.
Yeah, because Redskins was not even their first nickname.
And Washington was not their first city. Right.
They were the Boston Braves.
Just like the baseball team, just like a lot of NFL teams would more or less do back then.
They moved to D.C. They changed their name to the Redskins. And for the last 20 years, everybody yelled at them and said, why don't you change that awful nickname? And probably because they were getting yelled at, they refused to do it.
Yeah, it's got a little strident.
So you would think their second coach ever? Yes. Their first coach, of course, was the great Lud Ray. I think everybody remembers Lud. L-U-D. Great name. That was one of the Boston Braves. The next year, they became the Boston Redskins. And their coach was Lone Star Dietz. Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Lone Star. Then later in life, a little bit of controversy when it turned out that this proud Native American who coached the Redskins, not actually Native American. He was just pretending.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yes. Pretended to be an Indian, and he wasn't.
Yeah, I will say that it would not have been outlandish to have indigenous Americans, Native Americans playing football because, as we of course know, Jim Thorpe was a multi-sport Olympic athlete. But a lot of these company teams that the NFL sort of emanated from in those small Midwestern Rust Belt cities like Green Bay and Canton and Portsmouth, Ohio. There were Indian teams. Carlisle Indians, I believe, was one. There were a few of them.
William Henry Dietz, good old Lone Star, played at Carlisle with Jim Thorpe.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
I did not know that. I didn't mean to.
And that's why people just assumed he was an employee and briefly claimed to attend Oklahoma's Chilocco Indian Agricultural School. And he went to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. He was a star player. He also went on to coach in college for Washington State, Purdue, Louisiana Tech, the University of Wyoming, and, of course, the Haskell Institute, now known as Haskell Indian Nations University.
Okay, so it sounds like he was not just co-opting.
So he really leaned into it. Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Well, whether or not he was truly of Native American blood, he seemed rather unhesitant about exploiting it, being a mascot. Hey, look at he's our mascot. He's our coach.
Well, it's kind of like the weren't the Cleveland Indians? Like at one point they were the Naps, right? That was in honor of Napoleon Lajoie.
Their manager.
But didn't they also, they claimed they called themselves the Indians because of, and I'm going to forget the guy's first name, but Sakalexis?
I'm not
Louis
familiar with
Sakalexis.
No.
He was an actual Native American. He was a Penobscot. And he played for the Indians, and for a while, let's see.
Did he have a cartoonishly ridiculous red nose? And
yeah, he was actually he was.
Oh, he's smoking a cigar.
Yeah, right.
Well, you could. One of the defenses for the Redskin logo, as opposed to Chief Wahoo, which was that just like the Blackhawk logo, it's a regal sort of representation. I mean, I'm not advocating either way. I'm just as a point of fact. It's not Chief Wahoo.
Oh, you didn't think, you thought Chief Wahoo was offensive?
I didn't say offensive. Far from any sort of a real representation, and
the whole Blackhawks respect the Indian, and you can't step on it in the middle of the locker room. It's like, how you can keep people from stepping on your logo? Don't put it on the floor. Hang it on the wall like everybody else. Don't put it on the floor. Nobody can step on it.
Right. I mean, even accidentally.
Never understood that. Well, let's make it a pain in the ass to walk across our locker room. Let's put the logo right in the middle of it and tell everybody they can't step on it.
No.
So the Redskins got off to a flying start right from the very beginning.
In those early days, we've actually gone down the history rabbit hole. The Bears, of course, were pretty much always an elite team. At least the first 25 years of the 30 years. I mean, more or less half century. If you size it up. And in these days, the Giants and the Redskins were pretty much the main competition in the East. The Bears and the Packers, I guess, the Lions would come out of their division. So in pretty short order, I think the 36, the last year they were in Boston, they lost the championship. Pretty sure they lost to Green Bay. And then they motherfuckers came into Wrigley Field, unless I'm mistaken, in 37 and upset the Bears, who may have been undefeated until that happened, but that could have happened in 1942 instead. They basically, as we've established, the Bears' true golden era would be early 40s, between 1940 and 47. I think they won 4 championships, played in 5 or 6 out of the 7 years. And that would also happen to sort of coincide with the Redskins' first sort of truly golden era, till they also reemerged when the Bears did in the 80s. So as it turned out, the Bears and Redskins played each other, 1, 2, 3, I think 3 or 4 times between 37 and I guess it would be 43. And they were only Bears. They were 2-2. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they played. Let's see. 3.
Yeah, the first year they moved to Washington after they lost to the Packers as the Boston Redskins in 36. They won it all. That was their first NFL championship. And just point of fact, it did happen to take place at Wrigley Field. Just another point to Wrigley for its historical.
They played in the championship 4 times between 37 and 43.
Bears got the revenge on the 37 game, though.
Yeah. Bears lost in 37, 28-21. Then they won a squeaker in 40, 73-0. And then they lost in 42, and the Bears.
No, they won in 42. Right? Oh, no, you're right. They lost
in 42.
Right,
then the Bears came back and whooped them 41-21 in 43.
That would have been the Bears' third title in 4 seasons, which is elite. Not too many teams have ever really done that. and they would win another one 2 years later, which would be 4 championships in 6 years. There it is, kids. That's your Bears golden era. Just we're examining the Redskins because, like I said,
mere 80 years ago.
With them. Yeah, they were rivals from the early days. Also, the first 2 franchises to, I believe, the Redskins get credit for because George Preston Marshall was some, I think he was a borderline Southern Yahoo, so he probably had college football in his blood, and so he was big on the sort of showmanship there. I believe the first team to have a fight song.
Hail to the Redskins.
Hail to the Redskins, and Hallis was shortly had somebody. I don't know if it was apocryphal, if Ed McCaskey had something to do with. I don't think Bear Down Chicago Bears, but Bears and Redskins, first 2 teams with the fight song. Redskins were the first.
I can't imagine George paying. Well, I can't imagine George paying for anything, but I really can't imagine him paying Ed. So if Ed did it, it was voluntary because the old man wasn't paying.
The story would be Ed did it.
That shiftless SOB, as he liked to refer to his son-in-law. Well, this is good. The Bears' prime was in the 40s, just like Vag's prime. Because hers would have been about that time.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you have prom over at the Congress Hotel and take a horse and boogie over to up to Wrigley Field to see the Bears and the Redskins. That wouldn't be prom, I guess. Maybe a winter ball. Maybe the winter ball dance.
Who knows how they did it? How they did it in the 40s? It was wartime. You had your prom whenever you could.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So the Redskin Commander Braves football team, whatever they are, they're 12 years younger than the Bears. They're founded in 1932.
Yeah. Not a charter franchise, therefore.
The teams have played 51 times.
That's not a lot for 100 years.
No, there's big
every
gaps.
Other year.
Yeah. And there's big gaps in here because you figure they've got playoff games. That includes playoff games, championship games.
It's a lot of playoff games, actually.
The Commanders lead the series 26-24-1. But the Bears have scored more points, 1,101 to 949.
All because of that 1940 NFL
It's pretty much the spread is basically. Let's see, the spread is 52 points. 70. Bears, it swung 73 points in that one game.
Yeah. Kind of proof.
If you go to the Wikipedia page for the Commanders and go to the controversies section, there's a lot to read.
A lot of carrots that open up for new sections.
Yeah,
sub carrots.
It does say here that George Preston Marshall
cheated the government.
It does that too. So he was their original. He was their original owner. They were named after the Boston Braves baseball team, and they shared Braves Field. And the next year, they moved to Fenway Park and changed their name to the Redskins when they hired Lone Star Dietz. But basically, they decided the Braves wasn't offensive enough for George. What could we do?
Braves can mean anything, right? You can be a Scott.
Guys, we're going to need a slur. What do we got? Oh, Redskins. I like it. Let's do it.
Yeah, you could be William Wallace and be a Brave. I don't understand. Yeah,
so they won their first championship in their 5th year of existence. They beat the Packers 21-6. The next year they moved to D.C., so they did win a championship in Boston.
They did win one? No, I thought they lost to the Packers.
Oh, you're right. I can't read. They lost the Packers 21-6. So they never won. They never won Bupkis.
Unlike the famous Rams franchise that won a championship finally in Cleveland, but after winning gave the citizens of Cleveland the finger and took off for L.A. Here, the Redskins just slinked out of town after losing to Washington. Not losing to Washington, but slinking off to Washington.
So they were very successful in the 40s, just like the Bears were. And even into the 50s. And 2 months into the John Kennedy administration, March 24th, 1961, Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall, I don't know if that's Morris's old man or not, warned George Preston Marshall to hire black players or face federal retribution. The Redskins were still not integrated in 1961. For the first time in history, the federal government attempted to desegregate a professional sports team. The Redskins were under the threat of civil rights legal action by the Kennedy administration, which would have prevented a segregated team from playing in their stadium, the new D.C. stadium, which would eventually become RFK Stadium.
There's George Preston Marshall just planting his flag. It's 1960. He's like, we never should have left Boston. Is probably what he was thinking. Right?
Probably. Yeah, they would have fit right in.
Come on.
So in 1962, they didn't just become... Yeah, they became the final professional American football franchise. I guess because the AFL, they had to parse it that way. They drafted Ernie Davis out of Syracuse, first overall in the 62 draft. And they took fullback Ron Hatcher of Michigan State in the 8th round. They then traded Ernie Davis to the Browns.
He's black?
Before they ever used him. They traded for veteran running back Bobby Mitchell. And they turned him into a wide receiver.
You're going to be much more comfortable with the Browns.
And they drafted, and a first-round draft pick, Leroy Jackson of Western Illinois.
Well, there was something going on with Ernie Davis. He got sick, right?
He had leukemia.
About Ernie Davis? Yeah.
And he died without ever playing it down in professional football. I would think that maybe for George Preston Marshall, let's draft a sick one. Maybe he'll die and we won't have to play him. It's on our... Hey, Jack Kennedy. We drafted a guy. He's dead. Do we still have to play him?
So that's what Wikipedia had. It would probably also be in there, but I know it's pretty much an established fact that George Preston Marshall is single-handedly he is the one that it would be attributed with being the most responsible, if one man could be, for the owners' collective, prohibition of collective segregation, really, or just prohibition of black players and whatnot, which was never articulated, overtly expressed. It was a gentleman's agreement. So shame on everyone else, including Papa Bear, who I don't think was necessarily, instinctively, much further outside of any second-generation white Europeans of Chicago. Was outlandishly, prejudiced, but they all certainly went along with the West Virginian, Mr. Marshall, and agreed to not integrate the game. My question is, what was the gap between who was the last team? Like, how long did Washington hold out? Like Wrigley Field without lights. Like, I know the Red Sox in baseball held out like an embarrassing 3 or 4 years. Like once Jackie Robinson fell, I mean, Cubs held out for a while, but Ernie, they had guys by 53, 54. The Red Sox didn't.
Yeah,
have
the Bears integrated
in
in 52,
59. Yeah, so Hallis himself was probably itching to do it. He went along for what he thought ignorantly and with prejudice was the greater good, but he, as soon as that was lifting, and I don't know, I'm sure George Preston Marshall was hopping mad, but he had them hold the line even during World War II. So but I don't think it's out of line unless somebody produces research to the otherwise that Marshall's pretty much the number one mover behind football segregation in the 30s and 40s.
The Bears also had the first black quarterback.
Who would that be?
Willie Thrower.
Yeah, I think I knew that at one time.
1953.
You're like, somebody make him up?
How about
what
this?
Do you mean?
This will show you just how old this other dude was. In 1950, on October 18th, 1953, Willie came into the game to replace an ineffective George Blanda. 1953. 20 years later, Blanda was still running around. He was punting.
That's like that. That's like the Happy Days joke. No, it says more about Blanda than anything.
Yeah,
that's almost another one of those like Kevin Bacon or whatever. Just Blanda. But that does stretch pretty far back.
The Bears were the first team to draft an African-American player. They actually drafted George Taliaferro in 1949.
Okay.
George told old Papa Bear, screw it, I'm going to sign with the Los Angeles Dons of the rival All-American Football Conference.
Which is where the Browns, of course, were dominating it and would continue to almost dominate the NFL right away. And then the Colts and the 49ers, I believe, also came from the AFC. So it was a legit rival conference that was a threat to the NFL before the NFL was smart enough to absorb most of them.
So do you think George Preston Marshall was rolling and spinning in his grave when Doug Williams played quarterback in the Super Bowl?
First black quarterback, that's just desserts, obviously. That's a good call.
So George died in 1969, and how about this? The two of the guys on his board were battling for, their shareholders were battling for control of the team. They were Edward Bennett Williams and Jack Kent Cook.
Wow. One of whom would go on to eventually be the Baltimore Orioles owner. Am I correct?
Yes.
Edward. Okay. And Jack Kent Cook would win the Redskins sweepstakes, right?
Yeah. At the time, he still owned the Lakers. Of course, he owned the Lakers until he sold them to Jerry Buss.
Wow. You hear that, kids?
In the world's greatest docudrama ever made, Winning Time.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
That's fantastic. No, those are some historic movers and shakers on the whole organizational front. The Buss family, Jack Kent Cook, and the other three named George Preston Marshall. So the Redskins went right from George Preston Marshall to Jack Kent Cook, who himself was already established as the Lakers owner until he sold to the Buss family. I got that now. Wow.
Do you know? Yeah, you probably didn't watch the show. I don't think Winning Time.
No, I have not seen.
Do you know who played
No Time
Jack Kent Cook in the show?
Was it the Jack Kent Cook that you and I knew in the '80s? That was like 90 years old and had like a 19-year-old bride. Or no?
Well, no, it would be slightly. This would be the late '70s, and he was probably in his late 60s.
Was it? Would it be John Hurd? No, I have no idea.
Danny Noonan.
Oh,
Michael O'Keefe got to play, and he tried to sabotage the sale at the end, which was pretty good.
Okay, so that's interesting. They go from Marshall to Cook, and then during that time, then too, I would have to say. So you said that they were still pretty good into the 50s. And then they, it seems to me that they sort of disappeared until a little bit of the George Allen era, I think.
Yeah, it said they were, but I don't know that they were because they didn't make the playoffs between 1945 and 1971.
Yeah, so they went dark.
Yeah,
and I think what actually to give I'm not it's fun to shit on them, but just objectively, I think they had a dark age. And if I look through just the one loss through each season. Third, fourth, second, fourth, sixth, third, fifth, second, third. So never actually fucking horrible, but just mediocre. All right, pretty much like the '90s Cubs, but all the way through from post World War II, and of course, teams are integrating, and I don't think that's helping the cause that Marshall's holding out through the entire decade of the '50s. They bottom out at 112-1 and 61. That's probably what did it. Finished seventh. By that point, the NFL had expanded. The AFL was on the way. They were seventh place, and they were pretty much had reached a historical nadir.
Well, that's why they had the number one overall pick, so they could take Ernie Davis.
Yes, the dead black guy, so Jack Kent Cook George Preston Marshall could move on. And then some more mediocrity, but what sort of turned their fortunes around in the late 60s, what was to bring them out of the doldrums was honestly a pretty inspiring move, and it was to lure the wildly successful Vince Lombardi from Green Bay. Lombardi, of course, had achieved probably what's before and since been unprecedented success, and that would be 5 NFL championships in 7 seasons and 3 in a row.
Well, do you know who their coach was in 1952 and 1953?
I could look at it, but I'm not. You can see me looking away. Should I know the guy? Is it Patty Driscoll?
It's Curly Lambeau.
Oh, former Packer.
Yep.
Interesting.
The founder of the Packers, not just former Packer.
The Packers themselves, of course, were dark in the 50s, until they got Lombardi. Plucked him out of
I should have known this. Things were so good for the Redskins in the 50s that Joe Kuharich coached them from 54 to 58, quit to go coach at Notre Dame.
Is that right?
Yep. Notre Dame was considered, and then Dan Devine quit Green Bay to go coach at Notre Dame. Notre Dame was considered a much better job than an NFL job.
Even in the 50s, of course, this is before the Jets-Colts NFL title game of 58, which really started to turn the fortunes around for the NFL. I want to say Kuharich's son would go on to be a general manager for the Saints, who would work with Mike Ditka in his second go-around as a NFL head coach. I'm pretty sure there's a
guy who helped engineer the greatest trade in NFL history.
Yes, I think Kuharich was involved. So, yeah, that's interesting, looking at the Redskins just in the 50s. And the Bears, just to keep you on the track, the Bears were never shitty in the 50s. They went to one championship, got blown out, but mostly were second or third, got knocked out a few times late by the Rams. Rams were pretty good back then, but the Redskins pretty much completely faded from those annual championship games with the Bears were becoming a faded memory through the 50s and the 60s. And no appearances between 45 and 71, like you said. It's pretty dark times for Redskins.
They've had 7 of their coaches have been elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Though not necessarily based on their greatness with the Redskins.
Well, Lombardi's one.
And so is Curly Lambeau. Otto Graham, who probably didn't make it for his
another one.
Coaching.
That's another right. Right. Obviously, the ones who did would be George Allen and Joe Gibbs.
Yeah. I don't know about Ray Flaherty and Turk Edwards, but maybe they did.
Yeah, and of course Norv Turner.
Well, and then either just waiting for Chico Rivera to be inducted.
True.
So that'll be great.
True. Yeah. But yeah, it is funny. Lombardi does appear there, 7-5, and that's like, you look at it, that's the first time Lombardi in his one goddamn season, they finished over 500 for the first time in 14 years. Yep. So
he was
certainly bolstering the legend of Lombardi.
Vince was Jack and Cook's first hire. Brought Vince out of retirement, and then Vince he had leukemia too, right? Once said he died of cancer. Right before before the 1970 season. 75-2. I love when we look back at how often teams tied in the old days. I guess did they even have overtime in some of those
did not.
years? Yeah.
No, they didn't have overtime in the early 70s. They also had only 1 point conversions like now. So and of course Lombardi's leading passer that year was Sonny Jurgensen, who was a pretty interesting player in my book. I don't know if you remember a feature that Steve Sable's NFL Films had done on Jurgensen in the 80s, but he would be a longtime Redskin.
He's still hanging around. He's like one of their announcers.
He's a really neat guy. He's just an all-around. He's kind of a renaissance man. He was a quarterback. He was a little bit of a playboy when he was young. He was kind of a funny, goofy, fucking partier guy. He was never like a huge, great athlete. I once heard like somebody compare Rex Grossman to a little bit like a pudgy guy with a really good arm. It's almost sad for Jurgensen that Lombardi got sick, because one of the features of this NFL Things on Jurgensen, just a random piece, as NFL Films would do. And here's a thing on Sonny Jurgensen. And because he was kind of a phenom. I think Jurgensen was on the Eagles as a phenom a few years earlier. Bounced around or whatever, and he was really hitting his stride with Lombardi. But the 1 year, because Lombardi turns it around and George Allen would swoop in and would in fact take the Redskins to their first Super Bowl on the back of Billy Kilmer, who was another aging veteran. But that season, Jurgensen was just hurt. It just happened to be like his Andre Dawson '89. But George Allen just really shit on Jurgensen, and Jurgensen talks candidly about it in this piece. And I always kind of felt, he seemed like a good guy, and George Allen always seemed like a big dick. So that tracks.
Yeah, so Lombardi dies. Bill Austin is their interim coach in 70, and then George Allen gets hired in 71.
Steps right in. At that point, Allen, to his credit, had turned around or sort of rejuvenated a Rams franchise, or just continued. Rams were always pretty good, I think, and that's what Allen left George Halas and the Bears in a snit over. Halas, of course, was still stuck in the old times and thought he could just control anybody, and Allen was able to break free and take over the Rams, and he turned he built. He was successful there, but Allen tended to be nomadic or whatever, and walked into the situation in Washington that Lombardi had already begun to turn around, I think.
So
although
Allen,
that Austin wasn't going to 6-8. Sorry,
Allen was the defensive coordinator of the '63
of Halas's Bears, and he had like
NFL
a role
champions.
like as a scout. Like he was kind of like a quasi GM, because it's like, yeah, they didn't have one unless it was Muggs or whatever. Muggs was the president. So Allen had a lot of control, I think, but what was he going to do? The old man wasn't going to fucking officially turn anything over to him.
Jerry Vanisi died this week.
Saw that.
It's one of those where it's like he wasn't already dead. Well, congratulations, I guess.
Congratulations for living to 2022. And
Didn't know you were still around.
I had the exact same reaction. I honestly thought Vanisi had died already. But yeah, no, George Allen. It's funny how it all kind of like bounces back and ties together. You can, you kind of cover, Lombardi, leaving Green Bay and taking over. You get the George Allen coming in. He comes back to George Halas. Coming up through the ranks. It's all one big fishbowl. But yeah, Allen. That was probably his greatest or most popular success was this period here. The Redskins were back.
This is a different era. So it says here that even though Kent Cook took control of the team in '71, he was not allowed to to manage the team's day-to-day operations because he didn't live. He lived in L.A. So Edward Bennett Williams ran the team for Jack until
Allen was probably made GM or no?
1977.
Oh.
So Jack came
Edward
in.
Bennett
He fired George Allen, hired Jack Pardee, and let's roll, baby. I mean, he owned the team, but he was not. He wasn't supposedly running the day to day because he was living in California. Oh, you can't do that, so he had to move to Virginia.
First of all, he stole Jack Pardee from the Bears. Just hire him. But wait, I'm confused with what you were just saying there. So you're saying that there was some bylaw that said that Cook not being a resident of the District of Columbia, or
it said in the offseason, Redskins majority owner Jack Kent Cook moved from LA to Virginia and took over the team's day-to-day operations from Edward Bennett Williams. But he had owned the team the whole time.
Okay, and Williams was serving as the GM?
Maybe what he did, maybe he did a Jerry Jones. And it's like, fuck it, I'll just be my own general manager. I'm moving to Virginia because I'm about to sell the Lakers anyway. I'm going to go focus on the Redskins.
Well, wait, this is 71, right? Or 70?
He bought the team in 71. He didn't start running it day to day until 77.
Was he still owning the Lakers until then, or he owned
the Lakers till 79?
So he owned both teams, and that's okay.
And
I'm a little
fine.
confused. I'm a little confused as to how the Washington Redskins had one billionaire owner that owned the team and another basketball team, and a future billionaire owner, and Edgar Bennett Williams basically being the general manager. Is that what I have right? Is that, or was Jack? It was.
Well, I don't know. I mean, teams didn't even bother to have GMs back then. They just
was George Allen had to be running the show. I guess is my thing. Is that when he was the head coach, he was in charge of all this shit.
Wasn't everyone just a lawyer? I mean, not just
yes.
Yeah, he was a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, as far as relevant to football, and they don't list. So they don't list general manager on the 72 Dolphins, the team that went to the Super Bowl. They played at RFK. Edward Bennett Williams is president, partial owner. Jack Kent Cook was partial owner. What the fuck? Kind of weird. What did the Bears look like at that point?
So here are some of Edward Bennett Williams' clients. Sam Giancana.
Oh, Chicago. Local guy.
John Hinckley Jr.
What?
Frank Sinatra.
So one of the biggest mob bosses of the 20th century, a presidential assassination attempt there.
Not only that, but he also
And
former Texas Governor John Connally, who
who's
was also
Charles
shot
Kennedy
in the Kennedy.
Yes, by Kennedy. Wow.
Hugh Hefner.
He's like the Forrest Gump of attorneys.
Jimmy Hoffa.
What do you mean? Like, how is he? Like, he had to be like on a team. Like, they're in some cases tangentially related.
I don't know. Frank Costello, who isn't Jack Nicholson's character in The Departed? Isn't he basically Frank Costello?
I thought that was Whitey Bulger.
No, I only know Whitey Bulger
maybe
from,
you're right.
From Johnny Depp playing him.
I only know Mark Bulger.
Hey, Joe McCarthy. Not
the Cubs Yankees manager.
Not the Cubs Yankees manager. The former former commie baiter, Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy. And Michael Milken, Mr. Jump Box, who now shows up every year on your TV to talk about prostate cancer during baseball games. The Washington
relevant.
Post.
Yeah.
The Reverend Sung Yun Moon.
That's like a who's who of just like 60s, 70s life.
Two of his best friends were Art Buchwald, a columnist who most famously claimed that Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall stole the story.
Stole his idea for
Coming to America from him.
Yeah, and he was like 1/10 the talent of Mike Royko anyway, so fuck off, Art Buchwald.
And Washington Post editor-in-chief Ben Bradley.
Oh, speaking of Washington Post, let's tie more random shit together. When I was doing my very fly-by-night, half-assed, half-baked research on the Redskins and and George Preston Marshall, one of the Washington Post writers that would call him, I think, the bigot in chief, always needled him. Shirley Povich, who was a longtime, probably Hall of Fame writer,
absolutely.
Whose son would go on and just debase himself in one of the most ridiculous.
Well, by marrying Connie Chung? That's offensive. Oh, you mean by
having the exploitive talk show? Yeah. But no, you're right. Connie Chung, marrying that idiot, that is much more egregious. But yeah, and by the way, I looked up. If NFL teams did have GMs in 72, they would list them. For the Bears, it's president / general manager George Halas Jr. So until things came in. But the Redskins don't even have a general manager. So yeah, it's clear that during their Super Bowl era, which is what it was, and they go 25 years without a playoff appearance, which is the 60 years of the NFL or the 50 years of the NFL is a long time. George Allen is the guy that finally leads them back. For once and for all. And they went to the playoffs like 4 years in a row there, 72, 71 to 75.
And by the way, when I think of Maury Povich, I think of a current affair. I don't think of Maury.
Oh, sorry. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. 6:30 right before
maybe that's why he was attracted to Connie. He was used to that. Remember that music, that boom, boom.
I remember the 3D triangle like coming at me.
They didn't spare no expense. Yeah,
I call it a 3D triangle.
The George Allen Redskins. Let's see. They of course lost to the undefeated Dolphins.
They did.
Super Bowl, 14-7. They got their 7 points thanks to Garo Yepremian playing quarterback.
Yep. Dolphins did have a good defense, but what a ridiculous.
So that was 72. They also made the playoffs in 73, 74, and 76. Yeah. They lost the first round all 3 times.
Yeah, we are in the air. We've brought it up before. This was the Cowboys and Vikings ruled the NFC. And then the Rams and the Redskins, and maybe once in a while, I don't know, the Cardinals had a couple years with Jim Hart. The Redskins mostly couldn't get past. I'm guessing either the Cowboys or the Redskins, or the Cowboys, or the Vikings.
And George got Lovie Smithed. 1977, the Redskins went 9-5, but missed the playoffs, and he got fired. And Lovie go 10-6.
Wow, he did. 2012. Yep.
The Bears have only won 10 games once since then. Matt Nagy.
God, it's been 10 years too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for the reminder.
Well, hey,
So at this point, though, the Redskins now, that's a little burp. And not that we can speak as, if you were a Bears fan at that time, because now the Bears themselves are going on 10 years. No title, but there's still plenty of luster. But they make the Super Bowl, but they don't win it. Now they're going on, almost 4 decades. The rest of the 70s, they're sort of mediocre, right? That's
Well, yeah, they have Jack Pardee. Of course, they're mediocre.
But come on, they stole him from the Bears. Pardee took the Pardee actually is the guy that broke the Bears. What would be the Bears' longest stretch? They went between 63 and 77 without a playoff appearance. Pardee comes in, Jim Finks' first hire, and within 3 years they finally make the playoffs. And then whoever it is, Jack Kent Cook, right, just plucks him, and then Pardee kind of underwhelms with the Redskins, right? I don't know. He may have made one playoff team or whatnot. He did get the Redskins did I think get knocked out in 79 when Roger Staubach helped the Bears get in. But other than that, until they whacked Pardee and went with the next guy, not much would happen.
Yeah, 79 was the closest that the Redskins got to the playoffs under Pardee, and that was the 35-34 loss to Roger Staubach and the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I don't think Dallas had anything to play for. So thank you, Roger, for letting all the long-suffering Bears fans enjoy their second playoff appearance in only second in 3 years.
So in 79, was Coach Dicka, was he on his last legs as the Cowboys tight end, or was he their special teams coach?
He was on his last leg. There's some great NFL films if you go through the rabbit hole.
Dragging his leg as he's trying to run down the field.
Well, because that he catches a touchdown in Super Bowl VI when Landry snuffs out shoeless Dolphins the year before the undefeated Miami season in which they beat these very Redskins. But Ditka catches. Ditka also plays in the 70 Super Bowl in special teams, but he's got some good footage, like with a microphone, if you can find the right Steve Sable NFL films. But long gone by 79 from the player. He was definitely a coach, probably his fifth. He played about 72, 73, but Ditka's up and down the sidelines. Redskins get bounced out, and the Bears are in the playoffs. And Jack Pardee is starting to be on thin ice.
Pardee was the AP and the UPI NFC Coach of the Year in 1979. In 1980, the Redskins went 6-10, and he got canned. And on January 13th, 1981, Jack Kent Cook hired away Don Coryell's offensive coordinator from the San Diego Chargers.
Is that what Joe Gibbs was?
Yep.
I never knew that.
Little fella named Joe Gibbs.
God, I never knew Joe Gibbs was on the Coryell tree. I do think Joe Gibbs is sort of somehow massively underrated in the pantheon of coaches, but we can get to that in a minute.
And in that offseason, the Redskins acquired Mark May, Russ Grimm, and Dexter Manley in the draft. They started the 81 season 0-5, but finished 8-8. And in 1982, they were Super Bowl champions in a strike year. The Redskins, maybe that's why Joe doesn't get respect. You had to have a strike for Joe to win a championship. 2 out of his 3.
Good call. He, but then no strike in 91. It's always struck me. This I'm just going to throw. It's easy to goof on this franchise. They've had like 3 blips, really, of not that we can speak as Bears fans, but 40s and then early 70s where they still didn't win at all, and then all of a sudden Joe Gibbs, sort of an unassuming, kind of a soft-spoken guy. You're right. 82 is a strike-shortened season, but backed by John Riggins, who himself had probably been in the league for 10 years. It's kind of an over-the-hill gang. Joe Theismann had been in the league for 10 years. It's kind of like the 84 Cubs almost. But the Smurfs receivers, and they win their first championship in
behind
40 years.
They won it behind the most valuable player in 1982.
Oh, yeah, they're a place kicker.
Yeah, Mark Mosley.
Yeah, ridiculous.
What the fuck?
It's ridiculous. That's absurd. And Mark Mosley, who all we knew about then was that he was the last so-called straightaway kicker.
I wonder if I can find out who finished second, because it's got to be embarrassing to miss.
We looked it up. I think we looked it up.
Was it Walter?
Was it like Billy Sims or something? No.
Well, we're about to find out here.
All through a second.
The top
George
5
Rogers.
finishers in MVP voting in 1982 were Mark Mosley with 35 points. He edged out by 2 points Dan Fouts.
Absurd.
Marcus Allen finished third. Joe Theismann, Mama named him Theismann, I call him Theismann, finished fourth. And
Wait, who did you say was third?
Marcus Allen
Oh, yeah.
ran for 697 yards.
Second year
What the hell? But they only
player.
played 9 games. And Danny White finished fifth.
Right.
Mostly for his punting, I would think.
Right. Really strange year. It just shows you with only a 9-game schedule, it was really hard to get a read on the league. You got Danny White was certainly no Roger Staubach. Peyton's nowhere near there. He's in his prime. It's just a weird year.
I don't
obviously.
know why. It's weird. On this list, they have the Coach of the Year voting, and it goes all the way down to 6, and I don't see Coach Ditka anywhere.
His rookie year, the coach, he was turning things around. Nobody could appreciate it.
What were the Bears?
The Bears were
3-6. Were they 3-6?
They were 3-6, but they were not eliminated. They almost made the playoffs. As I've said, they could have
I'm
made
sure
the playoffs as a 4-5
he did a better
team.
job than Jim Hannafin. So he was
Of the
5-4.
Cardinals?
Jim Hannafin
Yeah.
went 5-4 and got Coach of the Year votes.
Yeah.
So did Lehman Bennett.
Wait, was this Tampa Bay Buccaneer Lehman Bennett or Atlanta Falcon Lehman Bennett?
Falcons.
Oh, okay. Well, Gibbs, of course, then would take the Redskins back in a full season, and then they would get skunked by the Los Angeles Raiders in the Super Bowl,
Yep.
and the AFC would not win another Super Bowl at that point.
There would be a interception.
14
The
seasons.
turning point of the game was an interception for a touchdown by former
Jack Squirek.
Illini linebacker Jack Squirek.
Dude, I never knew until 2 seconds ago that Jack Squirek was a former Illini.
Bears are wearing
No way.
orange helmets on Thursday night to honor Jack Squirek.
Well, I think he honored the 83 happened to be the season in which his alma mater went to the Rose Bowl too. So his Illinois goes to the Rose Bowl. Of course, they lose by 5 touchdowns, but in the same year, for their graduate Jack Squirek plays in the Super Bowl, and they win by 29 points, I believe, 38-9. Joe Theismann and the boys got crushed. That would be Joe Gibbs' only humiliation, and the last time, like I said, that the NFC would lose a Super Bowl for 14 years. And the other interesting thing that happened was that in Super Bowl 16, when the Redskins beat Don Shula and the Miami Dolphins, that Riggins on a 4th and 1, and it's pretty iconic. It won't be hard to find footage of this. On a 4th and 1 at midfield, it picked up the first down and then went the distance for, at the time, was the longest run from scrimmage in the Super Bowl. The very next year, I'm almost positive that the aforementioned Marcus Allen usurped Riggins' short-lived record by doing it right in front of him on the same field as the Raiders crushed the Redskins for their only Super Bowl loss in the Joe Gibbs era.
The 84 season is probably best remembered for Joe's leg break going the wrong way.
85. Because he played in the playoffs in 84.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, not before the Bears
That's
rattled
right.
his cage a few times.
That's right. 85.
Well, yes.
Joe broke his leg. Lawrence Taylor snapped it in half.
So, and this is where for most franchises, that's the end of the era, right? Like we got what we could out of this aging, annoying quarterback. We had this old John Riggins who partied his ass off. It's amazing he was so goddamn productive in his 30s playing that position. Let's pack it up, boys. The Bears, we're going to put them out of the way. They're going to join the 49ers. And within short order, the aforementioned bespectacled Joe Gibbs, the nerdy-looking football guy, would somehow reassemble a completely different team just a few years later. Not completely different. There were probably core elements like the offensive line, members of the defense, but certainly the skill positions. And if any of you out there can find me another coach that has had multiple success with different quarterbacks, running backs, and even wide receivers, Art Monk may have been the one constant, but I'd like to hear about it because I think it's pretty unique. Because when the Redskins come back in '87, Theismann's bye-bye. Reagan's in a retirement home.
Wait a minute. So you're saying he had more success with multiple quarterbacks than Ditka did with McMahon and Tom Zach and Flutie?
We watched and broke down that Bears-Giants game. I don't know how any
Harbaugh.
coach could not succeed with Tom Zach. Yeah. It's just a moral failing as well as a coaching failing. But it is nuts, though, right? Like, Walsh gets all that credit as the guru, the innovator, which in some respects is earned. But he also had Joe Montana, which, a little bit of a diamond in the rough. It wasn't like it was handed to him. But he seems, I think people sort of still think of Walsh. They kind of just automatically, without thinking about it, probably rank him higher than Gibbs. And they just, because of his contribution, I guess. I don't know what. And maybe I'm even wrong. I don't even know if anyone even thinks it. Probably a lot of people don't spend that much time thinking about the 80s coaches, but
that's all I think about.
Well, get your Raymond Berry, your Les Steckel. He's got a Darryl Rogers up their sleeve. But yeah, I mean, so just an interesting time. There's the Redskins. They win a Super Bowl, they get crushed, and then we're in that era of the 80s, that we've talked about. Teams were just dominant, and but Gibbs rebuilds. I mean, were they making the playoffs every year? They must have missed that year that Theismann crushed his aim. So, yeah, I guess as far as the Bears-Redskins, 84, the Bears knock them out. 85, the Bears just do it again in one of the most entertaining game I've ever been to, which we've kind of discussed, and we'll probably should just break that one down in the future. That game itself, they played each other a lot though in the 80s, and it was pretty even.
Well, let's look. My favorite, I think my favorite 80s coach, Joe Walton of the Jets.
See, interesting. Mine was Walt Michaels, also of the Jets.
That's right.
Came before
So in
Joe
the
Walton.
80s, let's see, 80 the Bears beat the Redskins 35-21.
I remember that. And then the Redskins pants in the next year, and the Bears scored like 10 yards in 81.
81, 24-7 Redskins. 84.
Playoffs.
Let's remember that. New Year's Eve.
We broke it down. Christmas Eve.
Oh, it says 12/30/84 here.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, you're right. New Year's Eve.
Yeah, 23-19 Bears. Rematch
broke
in
it down,
85
kids.
is the Joe Theismann 1-yard punt game. Bears win 45-10. Jim
And
McMahon
Peyton
catches
throws
a touchdown pass.
Yep. And then then it was like a month later that Theismann broke his ankle and never played again. So, yeah, that all did happen sort of in that window. Within a month of Theismann's 1-yard punt, he'd never play in a game again.
The next two times they would face each other would not be great.
Yeah,
Back-to-back playoff losses at Soldiers Field. 27-13 and on January 3rd, 87. Knocked the Bears out. Kept them from with a chance to repeat a Super Bowl.
We absolutely established that the last time we recorded the Bears-Giants, the first game of that season, the Bears were well within their window and in their prime, and it felt like they were going to, and that's how the season ended on a cold-ass day at Soldier Field with Walter Payton's helmet in his hands. The Redskins would go on to win that second Super Bowl with the aforementioned first ever black quarterback, up years, George Preston Marshall, and a different running back, a guy who nobody could even name. If I couldn't tell you, it was Timmy Smith, who disappeared after the Super Bowl and nobody heard of him before. And then
ran for 230 yards or something in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and then I remember the receiver Ricky Sanders, maybe. Who knows? Didn't matter to Joe Gibbs, man. He's going to win with his O-line players, whatever. In '88, though, the Bears and Redskins played again.
The Bears'
correct?
chance revenge game. Here we go. Going to pay him back.
But you know who the Bears coach on the sideline, I'm pretty sure, was? It wasn't the coach, because the coach had a heart attack, my friend. And defensive coordinator Vince Tobin would have to take the reins. I'm almost positive.
Okay, there's a game in between there.
In '88.
They had the playoff game after '87. Because we talked about the playoff game after '86, which is 27-13. They had a rematch.
I got them confused. You were talking about the '86.
Right. That was the we determined in very depressing fashion that The only punt return for a touchdown in Darryl Green's career happened in that game, and those were the decisive points in the Bears.
The 87 season
21-17.
game.
Right. So then,
Yes.
November 13th, 1988, and
Yes.
Vince Tobin fired up the Bears 34-14. Apparently, Coach Ditka was the problem, it looks like.
Could have been. That might have been the only game he missed. Is that right? Would that be right? Probably for the 80s it would.
He came back pretty fast, I remember.
Yeah, he had the episode happened at Lake Forest during the week, because remember I was in high school. It was big news because, kids, Bears are a big thing in the 80s. And, even if you're too cool to, follow, it's like, it didn't matter with the Bears. It was like, I remember between classes, like one of my classmates, hey, did you hear about Ditka? He had a heart attack. Sent a hush throughout Chicagoland.
So that
November 3rd, 88 was the heart attack. I could see.
Go ahead. Yeah, so just 11 days later. 10 days later.
Okay, so maybe he was going for a couple games.
Then next time they would meet, November 26th, 1989.
What's famous about that game, right?
Yeah, Donnell Wolford getting blamed for the Bears losing, and Dick is saying, I don't see how we're going to win another game. And he's right.
And he would prove to be correct. The Bears, and it was a shock at that point. So now I hope we've given some proper perspective here. We've talked about the 80s in the past, but 84, the Bears won 5 consecutive division titles. We're basically competing with these Redskins and Giants and 49. Not even thinking about the Packers; they're so beneath us. Year in and year out, we're there from 84 to 88, and that's just the truth. And then in 89, all of a sudden, get off to a 4-0 start. Hampton, has to leave again for surgery. They start stumbling, and this has not happened in 6 years. And they lose. What did their record be after that Redskins game? Because it was like none of us would want to accept that the Bears might not be good that year.
The Bears going into the game. The Bears were 6-5, and the Redskins were 5-6. So both teams were 6-6.
Both teams, for relative to their recent success, were kind of struggling at that point. So to hear your coach basically throw out this hyperbole, I don't think we're good enough to win.
Nobody believed it. It's like, whatever, Ditka.
Yes.
And then they lost the next week, 27-16 to the Vikings, and then they lost the week after that, 27-17 to the Lions, and who were led by Bob Galliano at quarterback. That's always a good sign. Then they lost at home to the Packers, 40-28.
Yes.
And then they went out to they finished the season New Year's or
Christmas
Eve in San Francisco.
26-0.
26-0.
Yeah. It was shocking how quickly that happened, because again, 5 straight divisions, 5 straight trips to the playoffs, 3 championship games, a Super Bowl championship, and then just like falling off a cliff after a hot start. And then, of course, they still had that residual buzz because the Bears would return to the playoffs in 90 and 91. There was, in fact, a heartbreaking loss in 90 to the Redskins in early December. Now we're in the era where every year the Bears get off to a hot start, 4-0, 5-1, and they start fading. And they remember as a freshman at Northern, they play the Redskins in December. I think there was the game where maybe Tomzak had a whole bunch of picks, but the Bears just I don't remember how. They just squandered the game away. They were leading, and they couldn't finish it off, and then they had a bad luck, and then it just season started to go like that a lot at that point. Like they would just finish in a mouse fart. So
here's a fun stat. Since that, we're not going to win. I don't see how we win another game. The Bears have played the Redskins 16 times. How many times do you think the Bears have beaten the Redskins?
It's the way you were asking.
This is not exactly a golden era for the Redskins.
Well, it's been as bad as the Bears. In fact, the Bears have at least been to a Super Bowl since then. The Redskins have, at least since 91, but that's close enough.
Right. Yeah,
what is it? Is it less than 6?
The Bears are 3-13.
Fuck.
Against Washington since then.
I can name one of them. Was 2019, the Thursday night game with Mitch. That's one of the 3. They've beaten them 3 times since 1987.
They beat them the last time they played them. It was on Monday Night Football, right?
No, it was Thursday night, 2019, right? Yeah. It was a Thursday night. I'm sure it was.
Clinton Dix had an interception for a touchdown for the Bears. And Okay, so it was Thursday night.
I'm almost positive. It was
That
Thursday
broke
night.
a 7-game losing streak.
I can't even think of the time before that they would have. I'm stumped. I'm floored. I can't even. 2003, Rex Grossman's debut. I was there. He threw a beautiful pass to Marty Booker. Could that be one of the three? I'm pretty sure the Bears won.
What year?
It was 2003, Grossman's debut in December.
Yes.
I knew.
That was the last win until.
Got it. Okay. So I was there.
27-24. It was a barn burner.
It was. I remember seeing his pass to Booker down the sideline and thinking, wow, that looks nice.
Redskins tied the game early in the fourth quarter. And swervy little Paul Ettinger made a 45-yard field goal as time expired to send the fans home in ecstasy. And the Bears were now 7-8. Woo!
Wow. It didn't matter, Dick. You're getting fired.
That was a huge matchup of Rex Grossman against Tim Hasselbeck.
Good. All right. So
a lot of good players in this game. The leading rusher for the Redskins was Rock Cartwright. A-Train had a big game for the Bears, 32 carries, 141 yards.
Okay. Attaboy, Anthony.
Leading receiver for the Bears was Marty Booker. Bobby Wade had 2 catches in that game.
Bobby Wade.
David Terrell had 1 for 22.
Always drop punts. Marty Booker, that'd be Marty's first go-around, right? Marty had 2 go-arounds. Was he not traded for Adewale Agunleye? I believe he was. But, all right, so we've randomly recalled 2, or I have 2 of the 3 Redskins wins since 87. The other one would be before 2003. Oh, I know. It was Brad Maynard throws a touchdown pass to Brian Urlacher. Marty Schottenheimer was the Redskins coach. And the Bears just fun as hell, miraculous, undeserved, but still like whatever, 13-3 out of the blue 2001 playoff season. That
wasn't even Maynard's. I mean, that was his biggest moment, but he had another huge moment in the game, thanks to the strategic brilliance of Dick Duran, with the Bears leading 20-13 with 20 seconds to go in the game, and the Bears in the shadow of their own end zone. Maynard took a safety, and the Bears,
as we've discussed,
got out of trouble and won the game 20-15.
History repeating itself. We actually have done a podcast, if you're interested, if you're so inclined, where the very first time we ever actually found an old ass game on YouTube and kind of had fun with it is a condensed Bears Redskins 84 playoff game. And in that game, Mike Ditka had Bears punter Dave Finzer do the exact same thing in the same stadium, because they're still playing in RFK in 2001.
I gotta tell you, I don't know why they had to resort to Maynard throwing the big pass. Jim Miller that had a really good game for that day for the Bears. He was 13-26 for 98 yards.
Oof.
He only threw for 71 more yards than Maynard did.
I wonder if there's a video of that, because I remember the funny thing was Urlacher was like an up back, or I probably don't call it an up back for field goal attempts, but he went in motion. And I remember it seemed kind of weird. Like, wait, is that Brian Urlacher going in motion? And then the ball was snapped to the punter, Maynard. He sort of stood up, and Urlacher was wide open.
The only Bear who had more yards that day than receiving yards than Brian Urlacher was Marty Booker, 7 for 74.
Wow.
Damian Shelton had 16. Des White had 5. David Terrell had 4, and Anthony Thomas had -1.
You know who the offensive coordinator was in 2001, don't you?
Was it the Shoop?
It was.
There are times this year where I feel like he's cracked into the headset and he's calling plays.
Until that second half, I would have agreed with you.
3rd and 9. What do you think? Well, we needed to throw a draw to set up the punt. All right, got it. That was his famous comment, right? He talked about how there are times when you just have to run a play to set up a punt.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, John, you're not helping yourself. Just stop.
The only video of the Brian Urlacher, Brad Maynard, or the Maynard to Urlacher is like coiffed from like Facebook or Twitter. Like I can't find it on YouTube, so I don't know how.
Well, if you want recent Brian Urlacher video, I'm sure there's video of him and Casey hanging out at the Capitol on January 6th. I'm sure somebody's got them on video.
Oh, you know what? It was like a 25-yard. I didn't know. I didn't remember it was like a 25-yard touchdown pass.
27.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I just dropped the link. It's actually a weird thing where it shows two plays that are unrelated, one involving Charlie Batch. But 27-yard touchdown. For some reason in my head, I kind of saw it more as like a PAT distance. But so yeah, of course he'd be second passing or second receiving yards. Urlacher would.
You think they had to flip a coin to see whether Maynard or Edinger would throw it? You think if Edinger threw, he would have to do that weird thing where he turned his back like all the way,
right.
Like Paul is just going to take way too long. Just let Brad do it.
Do his own Gary Premium.
Coach, I can throw it as long as I have to throw it less than 3 yards. Do we have one of those passes? No, we don't.
So that's pretty good that we've covered the 3 wins that the Bears have had over the Redskins since Ronald Reagan was president. So that's good. I guess the only thing we didn't really mention is that, Joe Gibbs would, of course, after the 87 Super Bowl, win his third one with yet a third quarterback and another journeyman. None of these quarterbacks are Hall of Famers either, by the way. But Mark Rippon. And his running back was a retreat, right? It was Ernest Biner was his main guy. He had Art Monk, too. I don't know if he had Art Monk as late as 91. He did have one constant receiver. But, he would win it again and also contribute to Marv Levy and the Buffalo Bills' yearly ignominy and win his third Super Bowl. And then after that Super Bowl, the Redskins have pretty much been almost worse ass than the Bears, which is saying a lot. But as we've established before, Andy, it is shocking how many NFL teams is embarrassing as the Bears have been for most of our lives, especially post Super Bowl, that there are as many as 10 franchises that are actually even worse during that time alone.
Since Joe Gibbs left, the Redskin football team commodes have had 11 coaches, including Joe, because he came back from 04 to 07.
And he took him to the playoffs again, which didn't happen a lot for him.
How many of those coaches have career records of 500 or better for the Redskins?
I'm going to just say a big fat fucking zero.
There is one. There's a gleam, man. There's a gleam.
Is it Joe Bugle?
Let
me throw some random Redskins coaches.
In his one season as coach, Marty Schottenheimer led the Redskins to 8-8 and got fired.
2001. It's not even above 500. Was it 2001?
Yeah. He was replaced by the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier.
Wait. Oh, yeah. See, I remember Spurrier was on the sidelines when Grossman made his debut because Spurrier was his coach in college. And that was supposed to be their return, right? Like that, it was a ballsy move. Spurrier had already retired after playing on the bowl game that year. Because I was in Florida that year for New Year's, I remember, and driving home. And I think Florida played the championship game, got whooped, and then Spurrier was like gone, and then he shows up in the NFL.
Right, and he famously said at the press conference that he wasn't going to sleep in his office. There's no reason to do that. These NFL coaches think this sport is so much more complicated than it really is. And he ran like short practices, and they didn't hit. And he went golfing every afternoon, and he went 12 and 20 and went home. And he wasn't wrong about a lot of that shit. It just didn't work.
The difference between a college
and he couldn't get out of there fast enough. He was like, "Oh, this sucks."
No, it wasn't even 3 years. I don't think
it was two seasons, 12 and 20, and then he was done.
Oh, so Grossman, we pretty much put the nail in the coffin for good old Steve in December of 2003. So wait, let me follow. Did Gibbs come out of retirement? Yeah, he did because Gibbs had him in the playoffs in 05. Yeah. So wait, all right, I can follow the track because you remember who succeeded Gibbs as coach when he retired the first time? We talked about it already. He's a former Bear
superstar from those 63 champions.
Correct. See, we keep tying it back together. And there's a guy that a lot of meatballs in us wanted. Well, we don't like that. Ditka's gone. All right. Yep. But if you're gonna get anybody to replace Ditka, why not Richie Pettibone? He's been coaching Joe Gibbs.
And it's funny.
But Richie that was the right choice.
Richie had gotten so fat that they'd show him on the sidelines, and you'd be like, he played defensive back for the Bears?
I always got thrown too because we're sort of NIU guys. When I went to NIU, Jerry Pettibone was the coach. No, that's a different.
He'd have been a
guy.
better choice. Jerry would have been.
No E at the end.
He would have brought
Right.
Stacey Robinson with, and the Bears would have won several.
I was
Super
like,
Bowls.
wait, are you sure that's Richie Pettibone or is that Abe Gibran come back to life? But no, it was Pettibone. And the funny thing was, I'm pretty sure. First of all, in defense of Michael McCaskey, wants to and in defense of Dave Wannstedt, he was the universal top choice. McCaskey actually got what he wanted. The meatballs wanted Pettibone. Yep. We got the better coach at the time, and actually, even at the time, it didn't matter that Wannstedt turned out to be a bust because Pettibone, I believe, got fired after one season. I could be wrong.
He did. He went 4-12 and got the boot.
And they went to Norv right after, then, right?
Right. So then they countered. The Bears had proven that it was genius to hire Jimmy Johnson as defensive coordinator. So let's go get the offensive coordinator, and they did. They hired Norv.
And then the Bears doubled down again. Let's get his brother to run our offense.
Norv took him to the playoffs once. He won a game.
Didn't?
Norv
What
won
year?
1-1 in the playoffs. I don't even know what. I don't tell from what year he went.
I'll pull it up because I'm curious. Because again, this is another dark age for Washington.
Does that mean
I do remember
had him on the doorstep of the Super Bowl?
No, it had to be a wild card.
Well, you had him in the. So
lost the
They
division.
lost in the division round.
1999. That's the year that the Rams it didn't matter. The Rams. Oh yeah, the Redskins or the Vikings and Rams were involved that year. Whatever. Yeah, the Buccaneers were at the title game, so maybe they stole the game. I do remember there's a year in there where their quarterback was Gus Frerotte, and I believe they missed the playoffs by one game. And a Sunday night game, Gus Frerotte scored a touchdown and did some weird, awkward headbutt of the goalpost, and he severed his neck or whatever. And
He headbutted the stands. Not even the goalpost. He headbutted the stands. Yeah, he hurt himself, knocked himself out.
And they somehow, I think it was 97. Could be wrong. Let's see. They were 8-7. That sounds about 8-7-1.
So Norv must have been the guy they drafted Heath Schuler for then, because they famously drafted Heath Schuler in the first round, and then they took. That was
Gus 1994.
Later. It's something they would then repeat when they drafted Robert Griffin Jr. the third, as Dan
RG3.
Yep. In the first round, and then took Kirk Cousins in a late round.
Ah, interesting. Well, Schuler, that would have been 94, so you're right. That would have been Norv's first year, assuming he was hired before
Former
the draft.
Congressman Heath Schuler.
And it was the same, Schuler. That was the Trent Dilfer, Heath Schuler draft. Those were the two hot quarterbacks in 94.
Heath was basically Madison Cawthorn without the wheelchair.
Is he that right wing?
I don't know.
Is that
weird?
Yeah, but
look how
between Joe Gibbs' retirement in 1992 and Joe Gibbs' return in 2005, the Redskins in those 13 years went to one playoff, didn't win, and so it was Gibbs there in 07 too. Do you think him to two playoff teams? It's asking a lot. It was asking a lot to have him do it. The guy was
two of the 4 years he made the playoffs. They won one game
and I think
lost two.
Yeah, so he actually won a playoff game in 05. So it's just asking a lot, though, to have him. Hey, let's.
Since 1981, only two coaches have won playoff games for the Redskins: Joe Gibbs and Norv Turner.
Wow, that's worse than the Bears have actually gotten playoff.
Well, that's
wins.
That's like our stat that the only two Bear coaches have ever won road playoff games. George Halas and Dave Wannstedt. Oh, God.
Wow. I didn't realize
Lovey never even coached one. We figured out.
Every playoff
game
was
multiple times and never had a road game. He had a neutral site game. Super Bowl.
So just to wrap it up, the only three playoff appearances post Joe Gibbs Roman numeral 2 in 07 was 2012, 2015, 2020. They lost the wild card, so they lost around a playoff game. Mike Shanahan, John Gruden, Ron Rivera, one coach each.
The coaches since it's kind of a renaissance for the whatever they are.
Yeah.
Since Joe left the second time, they've only had 5 coaches, and 3 of those coaches have coached in the playoffs, and they've all lost.
Wow.
Shanahan, Jay Gruden, and Chico.
Since Joe Gibbs won, even if you include Joe Gibbs too, in the last 30 years, they've only made the playoffs 6 times.
Yeah, they've only won
in
2
that
games.
same time, the Bears have been in the playoffs 04, 01, 05, 06, 10, 18. The Bears have been in the playoffs 3 as many times. So the Bears are at least no worse. And I believe the Bears have won more playoff games in that time because they won in 94, they won twice in 06, and they won once in 2010. So take that. Even in the last 30 years, the Redskins, even since that Joe Gibbs era, they're worse than the Bears. That's incredible. That's incredible. Right? 2 playoff wins. Bears have more. What a low bar.
Wow. All right. Well, it seems like a good time because we're talking football. So let's talk about. Do you know what next week is? NBA fans, basketball's back. Tip off the season with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers can make any $5 NBA moneyline bet and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. In addition to the usual bets, everyone can boost their winnings up to 100%. With DraftKings stepped up same-game parlays. With payouts bigger than ever, DraftKings Sportsbook is the place to bet on the NBA. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code POINTLESS. Make any $5 bet next week. And get $200 in free bets if your team wins. That's code POINTLESS. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Bonus issued as free bets, 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Deposit, parlay, wagering restrictions apply. Eligibility and terms at sportsbook.com, DraftKings.com/basketball terms. That just rolls right off the tongue.
It sure did. Didn't even know it was coming.
So now let's talk about the Washington Wizards. No, I'm just.
Well, I was going to say, you said why? Like, you got me thinking about basketball with that DraftKings read. I'm like, what NBA team in its history might have a history or a logo or a team name is? What would be the equivalent of the Washington Redskins? And I thought, well, the Washington Bullets. Certainly problematic, but I was just thinking in my head while listening to that read. If the NBA
we're Irish. I've always been offended by the Celtics.
The Celtics, right? Well, it's no fighting Irish.
I mean,
yes.
Why do they have to? What's with the fucking leprechaun? Huh? I mean, that's stereotyping.
Right.
How come
Why do you got to pronounce it Celtic?
How come we don't have a handsome guy with red hair and freckles and bad teeth? I mean, come on.
That's right. Right.
That's what we would rather have. Let's see, offensive nicknames.
It always comes back to
the NBA
Boston.
has more like out of place nicknames, like when the New Orleans Jazz moved to Utah and they didn't change it, or when the Minneapolis Lakers moved to Los Angeles and they didn't change their nickname.
That's funny. That's true. Well, yeah. Are there? Well, I still get confused with the whole Charlotte thing because I lost the thread on that.
They were the Hornets. Then they the Hornets moved to New Orleans, and they were the New Orleans Hornets.
And then the Charlotte
got
Bobcats
a new team. This is one of my favorite things. So Bob Williams, who owned Black Entertainment Television, named the Charlotte Bobcats after himself.
Oh, not all right. That is the feisty feline.
Then the New Orleans decided to rebrand, so they became the Pelicans, and so the Hornets was available, and Charlotte went back to the Hornets.
Wow.
So the original Hornets are the Pelicans. The current Hornets are a expansion team part 2.
It used to be the Bobcats.
Yes.
That's harder to follow than the Browns. At least I got the Browns Ravens in my head. But that's a bit to wrap your brain around. Almost as much as the fact that the Redskins have won 2 playoff games since 1992.
I think one of the things that blows youngsters' minds, and I know what blows youngsters' minds, is the fact that the Chicago Bulls still use their original logo.
And other teams don't?
No, everybody rebrands at some point, or at least they change a little bit. The Bulls don't tinker with that thing at all, and it's a really good logo. And of course, if you look at it upside down, it looks like an alien reading a book. A robot.
It does.
Looks like a robot.
I see a robot. Yep, robot reading a book. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, like even the subtle touches, like the little bit of blood on the tip of the bull's horn,
And of course, that guy got paid like $50 to do the logo. And here it is. What is it?
He was an old guy in the early 90s. He was interviewed. I can only tell you the guy was identified. He was not lost in the sands of time.
So it's 56
I don't know how
years
much
later, whatever it is, and they're still
right.
using
Well,
it.
by 1991, it was right. By 1991, though, when the Bulls were winning their titles, I remember. Here's the guy that came out with the logo.
That was their 25th anniversary.
Yes,
won,
the first title.
title.
Right.
Bulls made the playoffs in their first season.
Yeah, with Johnny Red Kerr as their coach.
The great Johnny Red Kerr. Who I believe did the same thing with the Suns.
Yes. He was the Suns, also the Suns expansion coach. I don't believe he also took the Suns to the playoffs. Yeah. The other thing about that was that in the 93 finals showed you how lame fucking Phoenix was, is that the Bulls, of course, would use Rock and Roll Part 2 as their intro, probably beginning early in their ascension. Could be They used the same fucking song. Like, I get how the Bulls were back when like Tommy Animal Stories Edwards was the PA announcer before Ray Clay. The Bulls were doing the knockout delay. They're original. They're largely original. Yeah. Other teams may be doing it. That was a thing, and it became a thing across the NBA. And I'm not begrudging that, but to play the same music, like, really, we're in the NBA Finals, and like, it's just.
So my senior year of high school was full blown Bulls mania. They would be on there. They would win the championship that summer, or that late spring, early summer.
After your senior year, yeah.
And I got to get the town right. It was either at Ashton or Franklin Center. I forget which one. One of those huge towns over there near Route 72 in northern Illinois.
Sure wasn't Byron?
No. We I forgot. I wish I could remember which team this was. So we played them, and so they for the intros, after they introduced us, they turned the lights off and they played that, and then they turned the lights back on, and they had to warm. They had to warm back up. We had to stand there. They let us warm up again while the lights warm back up. You guys didn't test this ever? Have you never turned the lights off and then turn it back on? Realize it takes 10 minutes?
Like the old gymnasium lights. You turn them off for more than a couple minutes.
It was great.
Right?
We just stood there. This is awesome. So yeah, their huge crowd of 80 people or whatever was all fired up, and then it kind of died down.
Man, we'll have to do some Bulls remember this crap that maybe wasn't covered in the Last Dance, perhaps. That's great. That was a thing, though. I don't recall, and I watched. We both watched a lot of sports in the '80s as kids. It seemed like the Bulls were trendsetters on that, but yeah. I don't know what that has to do with the Redskins' 2 playoff wins since Joe Gibbs' first retirement. By the way, Gibbs retired a year after his 3rd successful Super Bowl. They did go to the playoffs, but did not win a playoff game that year. So. They actually went between 91 and whatever. They haven't had they had the one Norv Turner team, so that's the one takeaway. Norv Turner gets the only non-Joe Gibbs playoff win since George Allen. Have we summarized it? That's probably correct. Jack Pardee never did it, so there's your if you want a reason to kick the Redskins under the down, there it is. That they've take out Joe Gibbs, and they're pretty woeful for the last 50 years, and really most of their franchise.
So the Bears have retired so many numbers, they famously have to get permission now from the NFL to retire more. And I do think that the loosening up of the number restrictions means the Bears are back in business. You can retire more numbers again.
I thought about that.
But so the Redskins, who've been around for just 12 years less and who've won 3 Super Bowls and all that stuff.
And 3 championships in the old era, or 2. Just 2. 5 all day, but whatever.
Guess how many numbers they've retired?
I'm looking at it. It's stupid.
3. And one of them was Sean Taylor, who they retired because he was killed.
Right.
And he's a great player, but I don't know that given the other great players they've had, they didn't retire it. If chances are, if he doesn't get shot, he doesn't get his number retired.
Well, and I'm sorry, Bobby Mitchell. Like, okay, obviously great player and a Hall of Famer. Also spent 4 years with Cleveland, 8 with the Redskins.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Did not play on any of their Super Bowl teams. None of the playoff teams. It doesn't make any. Was he the first black player? Was that what you said he was? Is that no. So? To talk about just he was the guy they traded Ernie Davis for, Bobby Mitchell, right?
Oh, maybe is that right? Maybe that's what.
I thought you read that earlier in the podcast.
Who knows what
Well, his first year was 62, so I think that. Well, I got it up. I should just.
No, you're right. Davis was traded for veteran running.
So it's like, okay, well, here's our first black guy. Put him in the Hall of Fame and leave us alone. Like,
probably.
And then meanwhile,
yeah, because how long into his career was it when they got him? He wasn't a rookie. He was
right. He was a veteran, and so
he was in his
years later.
He was in his fifth season.
Now, he
led the NFL in receptions and yards his first year, and yards his second year, and touchdowns his third year.
Okay, yeah, I see some bold. Yeah, very good, very good.
He's in the Hall of Fame
based on those two spectacular seasons.
Sammy Baugh is in the Hall of Fame,
and he had probably better numbers than Luckman or close. But okay, and then, but again, granted. I just already illustrated that Joe Gibbs was able to win Super Bowls with spare parts and not superstars, but really, John Riggins, you can put number 44 up there.
I mean, what about Darryl Green? He played 20 years for them.
There's another one, Darryl Green, Hall of Famer. I assume has to be. They won 3 Super Bowls. What about like the Hogs? What about future? Wears a sweater to a interview for a Bears head coaching job guy, Russ Grimm. I mean, was not one of those Hogs. Joe Jacoby, Dave Butts from Niles West, or one of those somewhere from Chicago, the Chicago area. It was not one of the Hogs who obviously they deserve credit. I'm sure some of those guys in the Hall of Fame, right? One of the Reds, they can't retire their numbers. They're white. Have you not noticed? Or are they being petulant? They're like, all right, fine. We're going to retire Bobby Mitchell's number. We're not going to retire anyone's number. You happy? Is that it? I don't know. Like they retire Sean Taylor's, right? I don't know. Fine, we'll retire his number. He got shot, bizarre. I mean, I don't really care that much about retired numbers. But
they have 16 Hall of Famers who were players because they also have like George Allen, Bobby Beathard, Joe Gibbs.
Yep. Probably about it. They put Preston Marshall.
Preston Marshall. Oh, yeah, I got to reward him.
Jesus Christ. They probably even put Jack Kent Cook in, too, because
I don't know their owner. I don't know how good Cliff Battles was. He played for 1932 to 37. But,
okay.
You think you would retire Darryl Green's number or Russ Grimm?
Darryl Green is number 1 on their whatever war is for football.
Or Art Monk didn't Art wasn't he didn't he have he set the all-time receptions record for them right before he got broken? He
was kind of an ahead of his time receiver in the 80s. He was a premier receiver. He would help have pulled up Joe Theismann. He was on at least 2 of those Super Bowls. Yeah. It's not. Wow.
Riggins played for them twice. He played 4 years for him the first time, and then 4 years for him.
You know what it was? Yeah, he sat out a year. He didn't play with anybody that gap.
Oh, you're right. He only missed 80, so he sat out a year to have a perm and work.
Well, he was, Riggo was a unique guy. He was.
So he was there for 8 years. It's not like he was there for 3. Now, Champ Bailey was only there for 4. They traded him for Clinton Portis, so we're not going to retire Champ's number.
And for fuck's sake, Art Monk was definitely on all 3 Washington Super Bowl. He played as late as 1995. So he was on all 3 Super Bowl teams. He played in all 4 of them, and he was a great annual. Is he not a Hall of Famer? Is he? You said you pulled this from the Hall of Fame page. Monk's the Hall of Fame, right? Yes, he is.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow, so stingy. They're the anti-Bears on the retired numbers. I mean, and you know what's funny? I was thinking about it'd be one thing if these were all guys from the 20s. Like you and I, or me especially, I'll bitch about how, you're going to put us, talk about retiring Mark Grace's number, but what about Frank Chance and, they didn't have numbers, but or Hack Wilson, the forgotten guys. There's no statue of Gabby Hartnett. All right, well, who gives a shit? That was a long time ago. The guys that we're talking about here aren't from a forgotten era. They are increasingly as we get older, but there's a large part of the population that remembers those Redskins teams from the 80s, and yet not a single one of them has been honored. And they've actually gone ahead and retired. Like I said, Sean Taylor, they've jumped over that era.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. It's just a weird fucking franchise.
Yeah, at one time for a few months. Art Monk had the record for both most catches in a season and most catches in his career. He set the career one in '92, and at the end of the year, Sterling Sharp broke the season record. But he held both records at the same time.
At one time. The 106 was in the early 80s, I think, right? Which was unheard of back then.
84.
Yes.
Wow. The Bears shut him down in the playoff.
That's fucking, it's
Sent
Mike
his ass
Richardson all coked up. And, well, probably Les Frazier, really. Wow.
He still holds Redskins records for total yards, receiving yards, catches, and consecutive games with at least one reception.
Yeah. Great player. I did notice that the Redskins' all-time leading passer is barely above the Bears. So it's not Sammy Baugh, but this guy probably took it from Sammy Baugh. And that, of course, is the one Joe Theismann. But it was only 25,000 yards something. Again, reminder for everybody, the Bears' all-time leading passer is Jay Cutler, 23,000 something 44 yards.
Well,
so the Redskins aren't really much better in that department. But again, Joe Gibbs is like, fuck it. I don't need a great quarterback. I want to win Super Bowls with these spare parts. I mean, Mark Rippon. Doug Williams was a good quarterback. He was a Buccaneers. He took the Buccaneers to the playoffs in '79. So, he won in multiple spots. He had decent, Gibbs had decent quarterbacks, but it does strike me that for all the talk that, you need a great quarterback to win, Joe Gibbs repeatedly is like, no. None of his quarterbacks were Hall of Famers. He won 3 different Super Bowls with him.
From the end of the '82 season until the start of the '87 season, Doug Williams played in one game. He attempted one pass. He
must have gone to the USFL, right? I bet you he did.
He had to go somewhere because he wasn't even a backup.
He didn't retire. Can't imagine.
Went to Grambling, worked on his degree.
Sure.
I'll come back eventually. Don't worry about it.
Didn't play football anywhere. That's pretty remarkable.
Oh, yeah. He played for the Oklahoma/Arizona Outlaws in the USFL.
Wait. That's kind of Blitz related.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Blitz switched with Arizona. We'll have to read. Was it Jeff Pearlman that wrote the Blitz book, the USFL book?
Yep.
I have to read that. You've talked about it before. I need to read that.
One of the things that lured Doug to the Oklahoma Outlaws, that's what they originally were, was they managed to coax Sid Gilman out of retirement. It just says briefly. Doug signed a $3 million contract with a $1 million signing bonus. He was one of the highest paid players in all of football. Years later, he recalled that he was won over when Outlaws owners William Tatham Sr. and Bill Tatham Jr. treated me as a human rather than a piece of cattle in a stockyard. Let's see.
Wow.
Yeah, he played pretty well for them. Then he got to the Redskins, and then he was a backup. And then didn't get a chance to play for basically a year. He just sat, and then by the end of that year, he was playing in the Super Bowl.
Well, and I think it is apocryphal, but in the Super Bowl, he was supposedly asked, how does the field to what was the question? How was it phrased? Because the big thing was, this is about a year after Al Campanis puts his foot in his mouth at Nightline in the same calendar year. Doug Williams is the first African-American to lead a team to the Super Bowl as a quarterback. And the question, I believe, was, have you always been a black quarterback? Yeah. Is that it? Yeah.
Or how long have you been a black quarterback?
Oh, that's what have you always been really be dumb. And then my only other fun fact is, do you remember back when in the late 80s when the NFC kept kicking the teeth out of the AFC in the Super Bowl, that networks would often try to launch a TV show after the Super Bowl that might take off? One year, I think it was the A-Team. I think when the Redskins beat the Dolphins, NBC premiered the A-Team, and then it sort of lasted for 5 years. Do you know the show that made its debut moments after Doug Williams and the Redskins were done kicking the shit out of John Elway and the Broncos? What did they score? 5 touchdowns in the second quarter of that game, but they beat them 42-10. Maybe they scored all 6.
No, they scored 35 points in the second quarter, so 5 touchdowns.
That's what it was. 42-10
until a more famous comeback for a long time, the Redskins being down 10-0 in a game they eventually won 42-10 was the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history until the 28-3.
Wow. Simply being down 10-0 by a team that won 32 by 32.
Yep.
Wow.
That was the biggest. No other team had ever been down by double digits in a Super Bowl and came back to win.
Wow.
And that record got obliterated.
So you remember what TV show debuted that night? January of 1988?
Let's see. It's the A-Team?
No, that was 82.
Oh, sure.
That was another Redskins win. Right. The hint is that the protagonist... No, I don't think... That might have been after the Red Sox that the ball went through Buckner's legs. I'm not sure. Different part of the season. No, the protagonist's dad apparently resembled your own father.
Oh, Growing Pains. Not Growing Pains. Wonder Years.
Yes, made its debut
No,
right after Super Bowl. I guess it would be 22
That's Wonder Years.
when Doug Williams became the first.
Yeah, my dad didn't look like Alan Thicke. He looked like Dan Loria.
Yeah, not as well known as Alan Thicke, but
still
that was
alive.
his role.
So.
Yeah, so I remember that. I remember watching that. Fred Savage comforting Winnie at the end when her brother died, and I never really watched Wonder Years, but I was very familiar with it. But yeah, that was like a thing back then for a few years. Let's launch this new show and get this artificially inflated ratings.
They still
maybe it'll last for 5 years.
They
would do different things.
Now
Like when Fox had football, they'd do like special Simpsons episodes or something. But yeah, there was at one point where I could tell you more of the ones besides A-Team and Growing Pains, but there were other shows that because some of them sucked and didn't deserve to be boosted.
Well, with Angela Lansbury dying this week, you saw
today or yesterday.
Saw a lot of Pat Summerall clips reading the Sunday night CBS lineup and getting to murder. She wrote.
I've been too busy. I've not been on Twitter. I saw
Madden
she died.
talking about how he just did it the first couple of times, and then it became a thing to see how long he could pause before he finally got to the she wrote. I
want to find some of those. We've got a kick out of those. Talked about it, but now that she's died, I did not see any Summerall references.
Well, and I think it's in Madden's the documentary that Fox did on Madden that actually came out right before he died. It was really good.
Talk about it. Yeah, they talk about
They talked about how the funniest thing they ever did. It's like, okay, I got to guarantee you, Pat and Tom Brookshire did funnier stuff than this. But Pat
see that Sun Bowl footage of Burt Reynolds.
Yeah. Pat was he was reading the promo and he got to murder. She wrote. And then the Sunday night movie was Gone with the Wind.
Nice.
And apparently Madden's like, well, I laughed so hard I had to leave the booth. It's like, okay, John, it's not that funny. Like, it's funny. That's pretty good. That's a good one. That is not side-splitting, have to leave the booth. Hilarious.
True. Well, Madden was prone to hyperbole. Just to bring it full circle once again, I used to always think that Angela Lansbury, my mom would have a resemblance to her, just to tie it together with your dad in the Wonder Years, guys. My dad, by the way, his resemblance was Paul Dooley from 16 Candles.
Oh, yeah. And Breaking Away.
Yeah, so, but, yeah, there's your Redskins.
A controversial performance in Breaking Away.
Oh, refund!
He was so fucking mean for the first half of that movie.
That's Heidi talk. That's Heidi food. Got your Edie, your linguine, your fettuccine. Evelyn, we are not Italian. All right, no, I'm done. And I'm going to luxuriate in the fact that the Redskins have actually been a worse franchise than the Bears for the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's been great.
Just forget about the Joe Gibbs.
Hopefully in week 6 of the NFL season, they will also be worse. Might be the Bears' last shot to win for a while. So might want to win this.
Yeah, looks that way.
All right. Well, I guess that's about all we can do for the Washington football franchise.
I would hope so.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike.
Hail to the Redskins, Andy.
Many of us have herpes.
I just want this to be over.